somebody you know knows the person interviewing and is going to give you the secret to get that job, the secret of what job not to take. That's just not your personality. You just have to be out there and asking and networking. So it really is like, it's fun to just kind of sew some things together like this. So now to Erin real quick. So Erin and I graduated from Denison almost about the same time, and we're friends there. We lost contact. I think we haven't talked to another significant amount of years. And but we re-met. We went to Denison has this really great remix, this entrepreneurial conference where the students can go to it, where they have alumni come back on campus. And that's how I met Lucy. And if you use your on-campus resources, there are people in the career development centers that all they're trying to do is get you a job. If you're not using those resources, you're just missing out on the easiest opportunity to network. So Erin, who I lost contact with, I had no idea she was one of the founding designers for Rothy's, who's one of the coolest shoe company. So we had no idea. And as soon as she spoke, and then we had this idea, I'm like, we got to get Erin to come here. So Erin, I'm so glad you're here. Great to see you. And thank you. I know Pearson's going to lead the interview for this, but I just want to say thank you for being here.
Thank you, Marcy, for including me and Allison. And it's nice to meet all of you. And I'm excited.
So Pearson, do you want to start with the first question? I don't know how you and Anna are doing this.
Yeah, I can. Oh, I didn't know if we were gonna let like Erin speak first, but yeah, I can ask the first question if you need me to. Yeah.
Okay, Erin, would you like to introduce yourself? That's the first question.
Tell us about your background. Is that the first question? Pearson, are we doing that, or should I just tell you guys what my scoop is?
Yeah, you tell us about your background and then I'll ask my first question.
Okay. I live in San Francisco. So it's only 3:30, and I'm getting over a head cold, so also ignore that. But I, as Marcy has told you, went to Denison, grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, went to Denison, lived in Chicago for a couple of years after graduation. That was an interesting spaghetti salad of jobs that I think prepared me for what I ultimately ended up doing. Moved to San Francisco in 1997 and have been here ever since. I worked at Gap for over a decade. I worked at interesting smaller companies like Patagonia, and then went back and worked at Old Navy. And I'd done a lot of different consulting jobs, which I find an interesting phase in my career journey. And then I ended up starting Rothy's with the two founders and built all the product from 2016 to 2023. And then I retired because I was very tired. But I didn't retire. It was a good time to kind of a nice inflection point to move on. I'm married and I have two daughters. My oldest is a senior in high school. We are pressing buttons and applying to college right now. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm doing all of this great work that Marcy's helping me stay invested and involved in the next generation of those who are going to go into the workforce, which will be my kids hopefully soon. And then I have a sophomore in college. She's at boarding school at Taft in Connecticut. Just came back from seeing her. And that's my story.
Okay, wait. I'll ask a couple of questions. Because the one question I have, I feel like I want you to talk about a little bit more. How was it like building Rothy's and starting it?
It was incredible. I mean, it was incredible. And I think it would be hard for me to have done it any sooner in my career, if that makes sense. So I think it was almost like, this is what I've been training for, but not really. I think working at a large, massive company, which we can talk about the pros and cons of that, working in small companies, being super flexible, trying different things early on, and sort of getting to a sense of who I was professionally in the main meat of my career working at these big companies taught me what I was able to do, and certainly taught me what I didn't know how to do, which was almost more important to start a startup. You're sort of like, I can do this, I can do that, I can definitely do that. I know enough to be dangerous and I can sort of do that. This I don't know anything about, and I don't even, but I know someone who does. So I think being an entrepreneur is super exciting, and I wouldn't have, I'm so honored to have been part of the ride, and an early founder, but I think it took a lot of interesting intersections in my life to really allow me to feel successful doing it. But it was a crazy job, and it was phenomenal. I can talk a tiny bit about the inception of the company if you think that would be helpful, or a little bit more about what I did there.
Hi, Erin. I had a question. I'm Anne. Thank you for being here tonight. I've been looking forward to this. I guess to kind of go off of or hear more about the Gap in Patagonia, what are the pros and cons of starting your career, would you say, at like a large company right out of college, like the Gap in Patagonia?
So pros and cons of the big company, I thought a lot about. And Daniel, I loved all your points about sort of company cultures and trying to understand and how to navigate. Good big companies have cultures and strong cultures, and they have, and I do believe in being able to write no matter what industry you're in. So always please everyone remember how to write with the English language. Don't use, Chat GPT for everything. I think some of the cons are, yes, it's a big company. Yes, you can feel small. You can feel humbled. You may not have a giant paycheck at the very beginning. You might have to you might have some self-starting you're going to need to work on. Like, okay, my boss is sort of checked out. What should I be doing today? But if you aren't a self-starter, you might not feel like you're successful in a large company, because you may need to be working and seeing around corners and being deeply observant in order to start to feel successful early on at a big company. It's a really interesting time. You have to have some patience, and you have the opportunity to say, is this what I really want to be doing? Because there's some tedium early on in big companies. That's just the reality of it. It's kind of a long game. It's like a mutual fund instead of a hedge fund. You're in it to understand and learn something bigger, and it takes a little longer. The pros so outweigh the cons, again, depending upon the company. If you're in the right sector or the right industry, the pros are definitely, if you start a little bit early, you get to see the gears. You're like inside the clock, and you get to see how everything kind of works. The stakes are sort of low. You may or may not have a huge scope of responsibility early on, but if you're smart, you're going to be paying attention. You're going to be understanding what kind of leaders have been impactful to you, what kind of leaders you think, I don't want to be that kind of leader. Or you may want to think about mentors and networking, because you will never meet more people than at a really big company pretty quickly. It's all of a sudden you kind of have a spider web of people, and you should take advantage of it. And the other thing about a big company is you can often see a lot about the sector or the industry you're in. I mean, so especially in retail, if you were working for the Gap, for example, and granted, I started in the 1900s, which was, one of my kids said that once, and I was like, they're actually right, because it was 1997, but it sounded so awful. And she was very young at the time, but I'm like, dear God. You have the advantage of the size and scope and scale of a giant company. They know their competitors. You can understand an entire sector when you're at a big company. You might be the biggest of the big companies in a certain sector, and therefore you're the leader, Amazon. But you also might be, constantly vying for shelf space or market space or customers. And you learn a lot about the whole industry if you're paying attention. So I do find a big company beneficial for think of it like a graduate program. And to the earlier conversations at Amazon, a lot of big companies have internship programs or training programs, or a lot of they bring on students out of good schools who have an interest or a passion. So that is a big pro for working at a kind of a large company from the jump. The stakes are lower. You may not be doing surgery your first day kind of thing, but it's been worth it for me. It really helped me be a better entrepreneur in the same space, 15 years later. So that's my pro and con. Oh, and also, wait, you guys, talk about networking. 2 weeks ago, I was in New York because I don't know if you guys have heard of or are familiar, but Mickey Drexler he was the former CEO of The Gap. He was there for 30 years, and then he went on to try to relaunch J. Crew, and he ran that for another 10 years with Jenna Lyons, and then he started a smaller fashion business with his son. But he's always been a mentor of mine because he's just nuts and brilliant and kind of crazy and pushes really hard when you work for him to find the truth and make you think. But he turned 80 over the summer, and I got invited to this. It was called the Gap Reunion. It was like 120 executive leaders who were there, they were calling it like the class of mid 90s to early 2000s or something. But man, was that a group of people who meant so much to me when I worked for them or worked alongside them or was maybe their manager or their mentor. And then I saw them all 2 weeks ago, some of whom I have not seen for like 20 years. What an incredible group of people. I realized that I never didn't know that, but to see the room of people and to realize the shared experience, the travel, the failures, the mistakes, the promotions, the drama, and the excitement of a big company was, I wouldn't have known that was coming, and I wouldn't have traded that for the world. So that was pretty cool about a big company.
I will
That's
say,
all. I'm sorry. Ms. Rossi, you can go.
yeah, Erin, there's nothing better than those little reunions like that because you don't even realize how much you went through things with people and how
No.
close you were until you see them again. It's just, it's a great way. And that's actually just showing how much fun and joy when you guys have your careers from college. There's this level of like, oh no, it looks stressful. It's work, but there are so many people you interact with and laughter and fun, and yeah.
It's great. You're right. That made all those horrible years of dragging rolling racks into elevators. By the way, I got stuck in an elevator, not stuck, but I was in an elevator with Steve Jobs and Mickey Drexler and a rolling rack of clothes. And I was like sweating, and I was probably a year in. You're just like, oh my God, please don't even ask me something because I can't speak. So those are the kind of things that do happen at big companies that might not happen at the smaller ones, but yeah.
I have a question. So, as you've been a part of the fashion industry for so long and it is such like a broad industry, do you mind sharing with us, a couple of like career paths you would suggest like post grads to really like look into at like entry level positions?
Yes. I think of retail and fashion as with like 5 buckets of work stream. And by the way, none of them are mutually exclusive. Some of them are sequential, some of them are parallel processed, but retail as an industry is just a big circle. It is a cycle of make things, sell them, decide if you should never do that again, do it differently, or you just hit the lottery. So it is simply a cycle. So first of all, the 5 areas, the way I look at it is the first bucket is sort of the designer or the creatives. They're the ones who are rethinking products and services. I don't know, for lack of a better, but products like, ooh, I want this great idea I'm inspired by a trip I had, or I have a great business and I want to build it out. So I'm going to add new product categories to my brand. But designers and creatives are one trough. They're the people who like really inspire. Then there's sort of the R&Ds and the makers, and they're doing the product development. They're like flying to really cool places. They're experimenting with new materials. In footwear or sneakers, like the amount of technology that goes into like Nike product development is insane. It's like 3 years to make a shoe. So there's all this fun research at R&D. There's tons of technology. And then sometimes you're just with makers. You're like in India because it's where this certain dye technique happens and you're watching it happen. That's the R&D maker bucket. Then there's the buyers and the merchants. And they kind of sit in the center of it a little bit because they need to make the decision about what to offer their customers, a customer. They need to understand what the designer was making. They need to make sure they've priced it correctly. They need to know who their competitors are. That's kind of what I did as a merchant. But that sort of sits in the middle of it because there's sort of a position where you're like, I can design a whole bunch of stuff, but somebody's got to press a button and buy it or not buy it, right? That's the sort of third route. The fourth route is this supply chain tech AI route that you guys, I don't understand it at all. I mean, I understand the supply chain piece, but there's so much happening with technology. And of course, there's so much happening with AI that sort of, it could be about manufacturing, pipeline, customer experience, fit. But that piece is also travel heavy too, and interesting in that there's every day exponentially, there's so much more information and better ways to do things, better ways that are more economical or better for the planet or smarter for a customer, et cetera. And then the fifth piece, which is like kind of a really big chunk, but this one is like the customer or marketing. So marketing is not merchandising. Marketing really is like, go connect what we bought with who really needs it or didn't know they needed it. And it could be digital, it can be a store, and the customer experience, depending upon the products, whether you've got, actual brick and mortar or you're direct to consumer only, and the only way you can market is through social media, or I'm going to have a sandwich board on the corner of a town and that's my marketing strategy. Whatever it looks like, marketing and the customer piece of it, if you don't have that, just forget it. The other four things, like you're trying to push a rope, right? Like you're doing it backwards. So those to me are sort of the ones who make that transaction happen. It could be store design. It could be running a store. And I remember my 4 years in Chicago right after Denison, I worked at a bunch of different companies. I thought I was going to be in PR and marketing and in the old fashioned sense of PR and marketing, when it was like newspapers and magazines and TV ads. Literally, I think that was it. And what I saw and what I thought was interesting at the time is this like sense of I tried a lot of different things. I mean, I truly was like, I tried and stuck my paw in as many interesting things or opportunities that came my way until I realized that retail as an industry was a lot more interesting than marketing and PR only. But without that, the retail industry doesn't really work either. So I got to just try and see and have empathy. I was a store manager at a Banana Republic. So when I sat in a desk at a corporate office, I wasn't like, oh, let's just reticket all the blue striped tees because we priced them wrong. That like there's people standing at a store in a stockroom like, you are kidding me. We just put them all away. So again, big company experience gets you see and do some of that, like maybe not so sexy stuff, but you make better decisions as a leader when you understand it kind
And
of
I think
holistically.
I was lucky to hear Erin speak at that Denison conference and have so much more insight to also her leadership. But this is such a good example that, if you don't really understand how the industry works, you can make decisions that make no sense on the floor. Like,
Yeah.
decide to do this ridiculous thing. And so
Right.
that's why it's so important that you really you don't go into one job just as this one thing you want to do, but you kind of look holistically and then you keep learning because there's other things out there that you're going to find that you like.
It's so true. Retail is just such a wild space. It's gotten, I think, department stores, things that don't work anymore, things that are changing. At the end of the day, people still want to buy things. People still want a new pair of shoes or a new sweater. I want to look pretty for this event or have a brand new blazer to go to a graduation. There's always going to be commerce, but it's a whole new world now. And it's really, really exciting. I probably couldn't get a job if I was starting over, because there's so much more and so many other ways to interact with products and customers. But I love it. I'm available if anyone has any specific questions, or within my network, if there's someone you are looking to get to. As Marcy said earlier, don't hesitate to put me on your list or find me in LinkedIn and let me know.
Well, Erin, thank you so much. I appreciate both you being here.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you guys for listening to me.
Yeah, so that was wonderful. So Daniel, Erin, that was great. And we're glad you're here and learned so much from you guys. So thanks for being with us. We'll spend the next 10 minutes just as our little group
Great.
talk about steps. But
Thanks,
thank you.
Marcy.
Thanks,
Alex.
everybody.